All right, great.
Great. I'll do a quick introduction, and then would love to ask more questions about your thoughts in the space. I personally consider VanExk to be one of the more innovative companies in the States, globally. One of the reasons why is I actually listened to, and I told Jan this early on, where I listened to Barry Riddles about your father, John C. VanExk, and he developed the first gold equity fund. And that was when everybody was bearish about gold. And it turned out to be probably one of the best investments historically. And so it's not surprising to see you in Bitcoin and crypto, because obviously you took an early interest in Bitcoin early on, and now you're diving deeper into DeFi. So why don't you do a quick introduction, and then I'll ask you a couple questions.
Yeah, sure. So thank you so much for having me on. I love engaging with the community, and I look forward to questions. A little bit of an update of where VanExk is today, just for those of you who are not familiar with our firm. We manage about $82 billion. The vast majority of that is in exchange-traded funds, ETFs, index-based product. I have about 300 colleagues globally. We have an active business in Europe and an index business in Europe as well that might be relevant later in our conversation. Kind of what I do and what I've done for a long time since I've been here is I basically try to come up with ways of investing in the financial services industry that can be value added for investors. So on the ETF side, we don't just do the broad market exposure, but for example, one thing we have, like in high yield bonds, we have a fallen angel ETF, and there's just a simple trick, which is if you buy high yield bonds right after they've been downgraded from investment grade and hold them, they outperform high yield indices. And so we package that into an ETF, a fallen angel ETF. It's outperformed. The Fed actually bought it in 2020. So that's kind of what I do. The second important piece, which I think is relevant for us as well, is by marketing the idea, you have to create liquidity around it. So like, for example, for this fixed income ETF, Fallen Angels, in its early days, it was not very efficient. It was a 1 or 2% spread. No one really wanted to buy it. If you're an institution, it wasn't big enough. And so, we focus on the big tokens, but there's a lot of illiquid tokens as well. And I think creating concepts in the space is maybe something that will develop going forward. So sorry for the long background, but I think it's relevant to the conversation today.
Absolutely. I'm going to dive in and talk about how did you first learn about crypto, and what was your first reaction to it when you heard it?
Well, first of all, I live to be paranoid, or I manage to be paranoid. The way I look at my job is I want to make sure that VanExk is going to be around in 10 years. I'm not really worried about growth. And so I'm constantly thinking about disruption and change in the world, just like my father did way back when. One of the first things I did in my career actually is do a joint venture in China in the early 1990s, before they even had a funds management regulation. So I'd heard about crypto actually from a colleague and from, of course, my oldest son. So for several years, and then early in 2017 did the deep dive. So I was joking at Bitcoin 2021 conference, people should have a badge for when they got into crypto. So I'm early 2017, and you can judge me on that any way you want.
I'd say like when you first hear about crypto and what the ramifications are for, kind of future products, what were some of those early thoughts that you had? Like, what would crypto mean to you when you first heard about it?
Well, the first was Bitcoin, right? So what is Bitcoin, and can Bitcoin disrupt gold, right? Yep. Here we have this $10 billion ETF, GDX based on gold. And like, oh my God, do I have to worry that that's going to zero? And, and that Bitcoin is going to supplant it. So I asked my colleagues, what they thought, and they said, I don't know. So, roll up your sleeves, do the deep dive, listen to Patrick O'Shaughnessy podcasts and anything else you can to get your hands white papers, and just try to figure out what conclusion you can come to. So that's the background.
And how has DeFi caught your eye?
So DeFi to me, I mean, look, what I see that's more exciting than Bitcoin alone is that And I, in 2017, was one of those stop talking about blockchain and banking the unbanked kind of people. I'm like, give me Bitcoin, right? But I do now see that open source, blockchain software technology is, I think, going to have a major disruptive effect to all three areas of finance, right? DeFi is obviously the banking area, but I separate secondly payments, and then third brokerage and exchanges. So I just think all of those areas have really breaking through, and I like to have what I call no jargon kind of discussions of what's happening in the crypto world. And what really caught my eye at the end of last year was really two things. Number one, yes, people were offering interest on their crypto holdings. And, I was trying to explain to some fixed income traders, why they needed to care about crypto. They didn't, want to understand. And I'm like, yeah, there are firms out there like Aave or, BlockFi that are going to be offering interest. And if that, and then the second thing, and this is probably more of an infrastructure kind of observation, but I think it's really important because if you're in the securities business, you're in the data business. Oracles. I mean, the fact that people were setting up data, organizations that, that could be referenced by smart contract technology. Smart contracts is nothing if you can't agree on the source of data. And that's not a completely solved problem, but it's being solved. And so that was it. And then I just, again, started going, kind of crazy and starting in December of last year.
What are some products that you're most excited about within DeFi? You mentioned Oracles, you mentioned Aave. What are some products that you're excited about? What are some products that you'd like to see built on DeFi?
Listen, again, I look at lending overall as being completely disruptible.
Yeah.
Right? You have the old world, like literally I'm refinancing my mortgage and I practically feel like I'm using the fax machine like we did 10 years ago during the financial crisis.
Yeah.
And so DeFi to me is sort of this part of instantaneous, 24/7, fully transparent. We can talk about that. The collateralization effect is really interesting. And then it's real-time credit scoring. So I think we're so early innings for this. Right now, the credit analysis is mainly about what collateralization you've done. But as we all know, there's so many different ways of judging people's credit. And China, in a way, Alipay is the forerunner of, I think, a lot of what's going to come. So all the different types of data that can instantaneously judge, but also adjust people's credit scores. I think that there's a lot of room to run, kind of using the technology here and moving away from, kind of these isolated financial institutions.
And digging deeper to what you mentioned about transparency, obviously a lot on the traditional side, there's lack of transparency in terms of kind of systemic risk. So how do you see that being solved in DeFi? Or is there a way to solve in DeFi? And is that like the larger opportunity here?
Well, I think, I think just the transparency nature will solve a lot of these issues. Like Gary Gensler talked about earlier this week about, how a hedge fund could use total return swaps and develop a big position in an underlying security and kind of no one knew what was going on. I don't see that as possible in kind of in a blockchain open source environment. And so I think it's good for systemic risk in the system, and that's what the regulators really aren't cheering on as much as they should. I think in a way, Dodd-Frank is this sort of whack-a-mole with here's the problem, and it pops up over here, and then we try to regulate that. And I think, as I said, the whole infrastructure around DeFi and kind of, as I say, I like to broaden it: open source, blockchain, financial lending, and credit analysis solutions. I think is just structurally superior.
Got it. We talk a lot about bringing institutions for DeFi to DeFi. Obviously, this event is to educate more institutions about DeFi. What's preventing them from coming all in? I've heard a lot earlier in our earlier conversations, maybe about regulations. Is that it? Or is there other kind of areas that we need to improve on before institutions are ready?
I think Ajit really talked about it in, just a couple of minutes ago, to use the jargon, permissioned pool, right? Which basically means that the other participants in that lending pool have gone through KYC AML. That's really 99% of the issue right now that I see. We just can't offer funds that lend into the DeFi system without those kind of protections. It's the red line for regulators, and that I 100% understand and agree with, right? And none of us in the ecosystem want to create on-ramps for criminal activity. That's not why we're in it. So I think if this can be structured simply, I think that'll allow institutions to get involved. There's still a lot, the sort of regulatory FUD, in a way, I do want to say, creates a behavioral reluctance from a lot of financial institutions, right? You've got what I call the fast institutions, hedge funds, family offices. But a lot of the fiduciaries, the wealth managers in the space, if there's just the slightest bit of regulatory concern, like New Jersey and BlockFi or something like that, it really muddies, increases career risk for the people in those institutions, and really slows things down, which is too bad. But AML KYC is the bottom line, I think.
Got it. And we're starting to see some institutional offerings for DeFi products. There's Grayscale that just offered a DeFi fund. Bitwise just had the top 10 index for DeFi. Is there institutional interest in just at least allocating to the space? And do you see that growing over time?
Yeah, there's two angles of DeFi, right? There's the tokens, which are kind of the equity play, the growth play, and then there's the income play. I'm actually a little bit more interested by the income play these days. I think sort of all of fintech and crypto is one big series of growth opportunities, right? From early stage VCs all the way up the cap table. And now we actually even offer an ETF on the publicly listed crypto companies like Coinbase. But, again, what I think is interesting is the income, right? Extremely low interest rates in traditional finance, and what's being offered and what's being discussed today in this conference, I think is going to be very attractive to end investors. It just has to be done in this AML KYC way.
Got it. And closing up, how is VanExk going to be participating in DeFi? Are you yield farming today or lending on Aave? Where do you see VanExk over time transform and take the advantage of what DeFi brings?
Well, we're very constrained, obviously, on the Bitcoin ETF front. So what we are doing in Europe is we offer two ETNs now on Bitcoin and Ethereum. That will grow aggressively because Europe has been friendly to those types of products. And then we are working on an income product for institutional clients. So we are definitely directly engaged in the space, and which is how we met, right? So we're trying to. I would reach my hand out to anyone who's listening. It's my summer project to see what can VanExk give to the ecosystem. How can we help? If we're a traditional manager, if you will, we want to lean forward into crypto generally. Please let us know if we can help.
Awesome. And any final words or comments that you'd like to make before we close up?
No, I just really excited to work with you all and others in the space and all the service providers, accountants, and everything, right? Just to have it grow. I think it's going to be really exciting. We just want to be a responsible participant and want to know how we can help to that extent.
Thank you so much for your time, Jan. It was great talking to you and learning more about how you think about the space.
Thanks.
Take care. Our next session will be panel number 5, Sizing the DeFi Market Opportunities for Institutions. We'll have Jeff Dorman from Arca, Christine Sadler from Fidelity, Ben Reynolds from Silvergate, and Noel Eckerson. So please join, and we'll kind of get that kickstarted with Patrick O'Kane being one of the moderators. Jan, thank you again once more. Appreciate it.
Great, thank you.